Today, I'm going to give you my other best EQ tip. We're going to talk about masking. Now, why is this my other best EQ tip? Well, because it's not very obvious. So unless someone shows you these things, well, you can't listen to a record really and figure out what's going on. So I'm going to show you something called masking, and I'm going to give you a little example. So masking is when two competing frequencies are well, they're living in the same space. So for example, you've got a vocal and you've got a pad, which is the example I'm going to show you, and it doesn't seem like they're really getting in the way of each other, but when you pull some frequencies out of the pad, then you get more clarity in the vocal, and this is how we get what we call separation. So when you hear a record and everything seems so clear, that's a big part of what's happening. So let's get to the laptop and I'll show you. Let's just dig into it. Okay, so diving right in. Here's an EQ. Let me show you what it sounds like without. So I've isolated only the vocal stack and the pad. So together. And here's what I came up with. Okay, so you see how when I put the EQ in, there's a big change in the perception of the vocal. So let's just backtrack and I'll show you how I approached it. First thing I did, let's just listen to the pad by itself. Nice and big, thick, round, a couple resonant frequencies in there. So I took them out. Minus 11, 12. So here's the first one. Kind of bogging the track down. Resonant frequencies is what I showed you a couple weeks ago. I thought, well, that sounds working pretty well. And I started working with it in context of the mix. And I tend to put the vocal in very, very early and work on the vocal sound because that's going to take priority. And then from there, so I make all the other stuff work around that. So here it is. So I felt like, okay, I need more clarity in the vocal. So one of the cool things about this plugin is you can sidechain. I'll show you what sidechaining is in another tutorial, but I can bring the signal from the vocal into this plugin, and putting it up here, I can have it display. So the red is the vocal. It is really helpful. So. See, there's a big area of the vocal occupying this space. That frequency is about 400, and I moved it around a little bit. Now you see how the vocal is sort of feeling all boggy, so if I dip that out, so when I take this frequency out, it feels like we get a little bit more space around the vocal. Now, it's not always the same place. You can't just go, okay, pull out 400 out of everything. It depends on where the focus of the vocal is. And then after that, in order to make this come alive a little bit, I searched around for something that didn't interfere with the vocal, and I found this. And this frequency here just helped the pad jump forward a little bit so you could feel the movement of it. It's not very loud in the mix, but it's nice when you can feel the chords changing, and that helped with that. So that is what masking is. You can do it on every instrument. I tend to do it between the kick drum and the bass, the vocal and everything else. So if there's harmonic information, especially pads, especially guitars, things that are playing chords, they tend to live in the same region, and I'm always going to go after that stuff and see how I can get more clarity, figure out which one is your priority, and then make accommodations so that the thing that you want to really cut through is cutting through. So what do you do now? Let me put this down. So what do you do now? You look at the element that you want to get more clarity on. In many cases it's the vocal, but you would do this with many elements in the mix, but let's use that as the example because that's what we worked on. So you take that, you figure out which elements are getting in the way by muting the different elements. So you've got your vocal playing, you've got the track playing, you mute the guitar, nothing much changes. You mute the pad. Oh, the vocal just got clear. So now you know you got to work on that pad a little bit. And then you go in, pull an EQ up, and start dipping an area out, and then move it around a little bit until you hear that clarity. Now be careful that you don't pull out like piles and piles of it. You might have to pull out a lot, but be careful that you don't pull out too much because you might ruin the sound that you're working on. But instead of listening to the sound that you're EQing, listen to the element that you're trying to clear up and move that frequency around, and you'll find usually at some point the clarity that you're looking for will start to happen. For example, again, in the vocal, then you can make some other accommodations to the sound that you're working on without getting in the way of the vocal. So quick review. Step 1, get rid of the resonant frequencies. Step 2, get stuff out of the way of other elements. And then step 3, enhancement EQ after that. You want to brighten something up, make it thicker. You know what you're dealing with, you know where the problems are, and you can enhance around the accommodations that you've made. If you've got a question right now, put it in the comments and I'll help you out. If this was in any way useful to you, it would be awesome if you would subscribe. I'll be here answering all your questions about mixing, producing, recording, in as much of a non-technical way as I can. Hey, I'm Steve Smith, also known as Steve in the Mix, and I will see you next time.